the National Drought Management Authority Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill 26 of 2019. And pursuant to Standing Order 47, subsection 1, the Senator for Trans Nzoia County, Senator Mike Ombito, will make a statement concerning misleading information in the media concerning coronavirus. The Senator for Kilifi County, Senator Stewart Madzayo, will make a statement concerning alleged rape and murder of Miss Margaret Shukrani Masha at the Bamba Police Station in Bamba Ward, Kilifi County, and the ensuing unrest in Bamba area following protests against alleged rape and murder of Miss Masha. Nominated Senator Dr. Isaac Moura will make a statement regarding effects of COVID-19 pandemic on micro and small enterprises. And pursuant to Standing Order 48, subsection 1, nominated Senator Sylvia Kasanga will seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Health regarding the operations of the National Hospital Insurance Fund, NHIF. The Senator for Nyandarua County, Senator Paul Gidiomi, will seek a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations regarding the alarming wave of unresolved murder cases in Oljoro Rock, Nyandarua County in the last 6 months. Nominated Senator Beatrice Kwamboka will seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Education regarding the status of education in Kenya following the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. The Senator for Isiolo County, Senator Fatuma Dulo, will seek a statement from the Ad Hoc Committee on the COVID-19 situation in Kenya concerning the challenges currently experienced in Isiolo County relating to COVID-19 pandemic preparedness. Senator for Bungoma County, Senator Moses Wetangula, will seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Roads and Transportation regarding the traffic congestion along the Bungoma-Kanduyi-Malava Road. And finally, the Senator for Vihiga County, Senator George Khaniri, will seek a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations concerning alleged increased cases of burglaries and robberies in the country during the curfew time. If you're just joining us, this is a sitting of the Senate on this 12th day of May 2020. My name is Edward Kabase. I will hand you over for this live broadcast courtesy of the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit and KBC. Good morning.
Let us pray. Mighty God, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor and blessings as your servants whom you have been pleased to call to leadership positions in this republic. We seek guidance to treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our charge. Amen.
I believe that the petition is a good petition. I also believe that if nothing is done about the quality of public service in the counties, then service delivery will suffer and continue to suffer as we sink more and more public funds in this area. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mahmood? Any other senator before I close the
Mr. Speaker, this is a very important petition. Mr. Speaker, on the advent of devolution, I think one thing we did not get right is how to handle public service. Public service of Kenya under PSC has over the years established traditions and regulations that safeguard the interests of public servants and also ensure there is career progression and safeguards against abuse. When the devolution came, every county with public service boards with little experience started employing people. First of all, even the quality was wanting. Secondly, in terms of career progression, people are employed. A first-year graduate, 2 years employed as director, job group R, job group P, whatever they call it, and there is no progression thereafter. In fact, there is a crisis in how the public service in the counties are being handled. There must be an overarching regulation which actually covers everybody, so that we actually have entry points, progressions, disciplinary procedures, so that people are employed for the job they are done, so that you don't end up frustrating the very people you employ. Then when government changes, then people change again. This is what is regarded. I think there must be the committee looking at this. I think with time we require some law to actually put some sanity into the management of public service in the counties. I thank you.
Thank you. Senator Mazayo.
Asante Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, pia mimi nikiweza kuwapatia kongole wale ambao wameleta petition hii kutoka Machakos, ni kwamba ni jambo la kusikitisha katika serikali za county tukiona kwamba wafanyikazi haki zao zinagandamishwa sana. Bwana Spika, mimi mwenyewe niliangalia ama nilichunguza, nimeweza kuketi katika koti ambayo imeangalia maslahi ya wafanyikazi. Bwana Spika, utaona kwamba katika Kenya mfanyikazi aliye chini haheshimiwi, na sisi tunasema kwamba ni muhimu sana kama kila mtu katika nchi hii aweze kuheshimiwa katika utendakazi wake. Kila mikono miwili ambayo inafanya kazi lazima iregeshewe asante kulingana na haki na mshahara na ile kazi aliyotenda. Bwana Spika, tukiangalia hii petition tunaona kwamba hawa walifanya kazi na hao kusema kwamba wanataka kuondoka, na hatujui ni kwa sababu gani waliachishwa hiyo kazi. Bwana Spika, ukitaka kuachisha mtu kazi ni sharti uweze kumweleza ni kosa gani alilofanya ama ni njia gani ambayo uliofuata wewe kama tajiri ili kuweza kumwachisha kazi. Hawezi kumwachisha kazi vile unavyotaka. Bwana Spika, ukiangalia katika county mara nyingi utaona ya kwamba wafanyikazi morali yao iko chini sana. Hii ni sababu ya kwamba stakabadhi za masomo hazitiliwi uzito. Utapata ya kwamba mtu ambaye amesoma mpaka amepata PhD ama daktari wanafanya kazi katika hospitali yetu kama hivi sasa wakati wa COVID-19. Mishahara yao ukiangalia na wale watu wanafanya kazi kama chief officers na wapi, wao utaona kwamba mishahara ya chief officers iko juu kuliko mishahara ya madaktari. Kwa hiyo tutasema ya kwamba kulinganishana na kisomo na experience ya mtu ndio sababu kuwe na njia ama muafaka maalum wa kuonyesha kwamba ikiwa umesoma umefika kiasi fulani utapata kiasi fulani, ili hiyo ratiba kama hiyo iweze kufuatwa katika kaunti zote 47. Asante Bwana Spika.
Okay, Senator Cheruiyot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the progress of any society, institution, hinges so strongly on the kind of human resource that that particular institution or body can attract. The fact that as a Senate, almost 7-8 years into devolution, we haven't been able to resolve the long-standing issue of how our employees, particularly those who transited from the defunct local authorities, and those who are employed by previous regimes, that is in counties where a particular governor wasn't elected back into office, are treated, continues to undermine devolution, Mr. Speaker. It continues to do so because it is impossible to progress as a county if you cannot attract the best brains that are available in a particular jurisdiction. Mr. Speaker, it is no secret that many of the people who apply for jobs into counties do so with a heavy heart most of the time. And perhaps many of them just take up the offer because as a last resort. But you will hardly find a situation where people can confidently apply to serve members of the public in a particular county due to political interference. We must be able, Mr. Speaker, as a Senate, to consider, and perhaps this petition presents an avenue for us, to give a long-lasting solution on how we can safeguard the right of workers in our county government, such that despite the fact that one administration may transit office, at least the rights of our workers are not interfered with. And that is the only way we shall be able to ensure that we have the best talents working in our counties, Mr. Speaker, and therefore provide the best services to Mwananchi and ensure that our counties progress. Failure to do that, Mr. Speaker, things will remain as they are, and it will be extremely difficult for us to be proud. I want to believe it was not out of idle duty that the petitioners wrote this petition to this House. They believe in this institution. They know that on each and every occasion that when the Senate is called upon to rise to the occasion and give direction that will influence and shape the future of this country, we have never failed to do so, Mr. Speaker. I hope on this particular petition, we shall once again be able to achieve that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I think order. Secretary Cheriot, you have, why are you saying the things you are saying from where you're sitting?
No, Mr. Speaker, I could see as if you are squinting.
No,
so I
the
was
things you are
you.
saying are right, but they cannot be said from where you are sitting.
I am much obliged, Mr. Speaker.
Because you are basically dishing out opportunities
orders.
to talk to senators
Apologies.
from the backbench. Very well. I think we need to close. Let me see. There is Senator Imana. Who else? Senator Zakaja. Just two. Okay. Let's hear those two and move on. Senator Imana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to add my voice to supporting the petition by the citizens of Machakos that they should be treated right and with respect. Mr. Speaker, those of us who are gray in the head remember a time when this country employed people based on their credentials, based on what they got in school. There is a trend that is really going around in the country and is taking us downwards by the fact that in counties, in several counties, people are actually given jobs based on their political inclinations, based on who they supported in the elections. This trend cannot push for Kenya forward. This trend cannot develop Kenya because what it means is you're going to get people with dubious credentials, unable to think, unable to project issues to bigger scales, and then now development is going to be affected because they do not know what to do. They're only sitting there waiting for their salaries. So bundling out people who may have been qualified, who may have worked diligently, is not fair at all. It is us, senators, who should set the rules so that everybody in the country, in all counties, can be treated fairly, so that they get what they deserve. Mr. Speaker, I do support this petition. Thank you.
Order, Senator Lagat. You are late, meaning you are raising your hand as an afterthought. Let's hear from Senator Zakaja, because this is a labor issue mainly.
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, yes, this is a labor issue. I want to thank the petitioners for raising this matter with the Senate. Mr. Speaker, labor issues have really been a mess in our counties, and we've really been struggling as a labor committee to get a hand on them. We have several proposals, including legislative proposals that we're bringing. Because of the nature of having 47 different public service boards without a coordinated way of working, Mr. Speaker, we have brought to this House a county public service board bill that will help us address many of these things that cut across counties. When we came up with the devolution in 2010, Mr. Speaker, it was not to create ethnic Balkans, that someone who's born in Tharaka Nithi must work only in Tharaka Nithi. There are certain skills that need transferability, that need coordination between counties. And then within counties, Mr. Speaker, we have many cases like this. Non-remittance of statutory deductions. The counties owe the pension funds, the LAP Trust and LAP Fund, billions, you know, possibly now maybe 70 something billion. So we have a lot of former workers of local authorities, pensioners out there who cannot access money that they worked for over years and years of giving service. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to assure this House that the Labour Committee, which I lead and very ably deputized by Senator Milgo, I think I saw earlier, will look into this. But on top of it, Mr. Speaker, we shall give that legislative proposal. I hope it can be fast-tracked, so that tomorrow it is not Tharaka Nithi and then Nairobi and then Narok and then Vihiga, because this is happening in all our counties, all 47 counties. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to give that undertaking. If this petition, this petition is
Order, Senator Sakaja, would you like to be informed by Senator Wambua?
Of course. I don't know anyone who would refuse such an opportunity.
Senator Wambua?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Speaker, the Senator for Nairobi has touched on a very important issue, on the issue of non-remittance of statutory deductions. The Speaker, the painful thing about it is that money is already deducted from employees. So from their salaries, the money has been deducted. But the county governments have not remitted that money to the trust fund, and somebody has definitely pocketed that money. Mr. Speaker, this is a criminal case, really. And I want to urge, because Senator Sakaja is the chair for Labour, that they take very, very drastic action and recommendations on how to manage this issue, because it's a serious, serious issue, Mr. Speaker. I thank you.
Right. Mr. Sakaja, you still...
yeah, Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I want to thank Senator Wambua, because it is really painful. The money has been deducted over years from your salary and it is not remitted. Mr. Speaker, some of the proposals we're bringing as Labour Committee, and I'm glad that now our look at the county allocation of revenue bill has been pushed a bit. Once we get full verification of all these debts from each county, what each county owes, lap trust, lap fund, what each county has not paid as pay as you earn, we want to propose, Mr. Speaker, that we deduct that money at source here in Kara and pay lap trust, lap fund, and KRA what is owed by these people. Because when you give that money back to the counties, they're not remitting it. And it is the ordinary former councillor, former local government worker, sweeper, who is suffering, not getting benefits that they have worked hard for. So I'll bring this proposal, Mr. Speaker, and I hope senators will be able to consider it positively. Thank you, sir.
Senator Dr. Lagat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to add two things on this one. I support this particular petition fully because it is very important. I just wanted, Mr. Speaker, to inform Senator Wambua that the concerns on matters ECD education in counties has been a great challenge for a long time, and the Senate Education Committee has developed a bill, and it is now at mediation point with the National Assembly, and I'm sure that sooner that one will come to fruitful stage. Another one, Mr. Speaker, I just want to add that we need to solve this issue very seriously. Most of us have observed the reports from Auditor General more often than not. And if you check, this particular area has been used as a loophole by most of the counties to misuse the money that we actually give to the counties in the name of human resource development. You'll find out that in most of the counties, the recommendations by the Auditor General is that there was a seminar for 2 days, there was a seminar for 3 days, and it is taken as if it was a complete training for workers. And if you check the money that is spent in such an area, Mr. Speaker, is so much like that, unless we check on this one, it is a great loophole for the corruption in our counties. So we've got to develop proper structures for recruitment and staff development. Otherwise, some governors will take advantage of this, take people for a seminar for 2 days, and take a lot of money from the taxpayers. That is my contribution, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, pursuant to Standing Order 232.1, The petition should be committed to the relevant standing committee for its consideration. In this case, I direct that the petition be committed to the Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare. In terms of Standing Order 232-2, the committee is required in not more than 60 calendar days from the time of reading this prayer to respond to the petitioner by way of a report addressed to the petitioner and laid on the table of the Senate. Thank you. Very well. Other senators, I have a communication to make. Honorable senators, as you recall, on Tuesday, 5th May 2020, a number of senators, while contributing to the debate on the second reading of the County Allocation of Revenue Bill, Senate Bill number 7 of 2020, raised concern on the status of the third basis for revenue sharing among county governments. Following the concerns raised by the senators, the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget moved that debate on the county allocation of revenue bill, Senate Bill number 7 of 2020, be adjourned pursuant to Standing Order 105. The adjournment was done on the premise that senators required a forum for consultation on the third basis for revenue sharing among county governments before proceeding with the second reading of the bill. Honorable senators, in compliance with the directive of the chair, the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget, in collaboration with the Commission on Revenue Allocation, has organized a meeting for all senators to discuss the proposed third basis for revenue sharing among county governments. The event will take place on Thursday, 14th May 2020, at the Bomas of Kenya in Nairobi from 8 a.m. All honorable senators are invited to participate in this crucial meeting. Senators may confirm their participation with the office of the clerk of the Senate for purposes of planning. Thank you. Next order.
Order number 5, papers.
Order, senators. First, we have a chairperson, ad hoc committee on COVID-19 situation in Kenya. Senator Sakaja.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of the Senate today, Tuesday, 12th May, a very special day for me, my daughter's birthday. The 5th progress report of the ad hoc committee on COVID-19 situation in Kenya. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. You are careful not to misuse the airtime of Senate to send greetings to members of your family. Nevertheless, thank you, Senator Sakaja. Next. Chairperson, Standing Committee on Land, Environment and Natural Resources, Senator Githiomi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this House today, Tuesday, 12th of May, the report of the Standing Committee on Land, Environment and Natural Resources on the Sectional Properties Bill, National Assembly Bill number 23 of 2019.
Order, Senator Githiomi and Senator Sakaja, none of you has laid any paper.
Mr. Speaker, sir.
You have just told us what you are doing, but you have not done it.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I consulted the clerk.
Okay.
And he told me that they have the papers.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker,
so this
sir,
is in light of the health issues.
I should think so.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, sir.
Yes, okay.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I also wish to lay on the table of the House a report of the Standing Committee of Land, Environment and Natural Resources on the National Drought Management Authority Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills, number 26 of 2019. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Chairperson, Ad hoc Committee on COVID-19 situation in Kenya, Senator Sakaja.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of motion on the 5th progress report of the Ad hoc Committee on COVID-19 situation in Kenya, that the Senate adopts the 5th progress report of the Ad hoc Committee on COVID-19 situation in Kenya, laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 12th May 2020, and which I have laid electronically.
Yes, for the record. Thank you. Next order.
Order number 7, statements.
Order, Senators, we have 3 statements pursuant to Standing Order 47-1 and 6 statements under Standing Order 48-1. Those are 9 statements. So we are moving at lightning speed. So I'll start with the first one. We'll go chronologically at lightning speed, and we'll limit our observations so that we can cover all the ground. First, Senator for Trans Nzoia County, Senator Mbito, to make a statement. She's not in the House, deferred. Next, Senator for Kilifi County, Senator Mazayo, to make a statement on the alleged rape and murder in Bamba Police Station, Kilifi County. Senator Mazayo.
Asante Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, kupitia sheria zetu za bunge, kipengele cha 47 ya kwanza, nasimama kuongea kuhusu jambo ambalo linahusika katika nchi ama na county, kuhusu kunajisiwa au kubakwa kwa msichana na alafu akauawa kinyama, na hali alikuwa ni mtoto mdogo sana wa miaka 16. Anaitwa Margaret Shukrani Masha.
No, is your statement, Senator Mazayo, in English or Kiswahili?
Bwana Spika, statement ambayo iko hapa ni ya Kizungu ambayo niliandika mimi, lakini kuitafsiri hii statement hii mimi nimetafsiri Kiswahili.
Order, Senator Mazayo. Why are you complicating your own life? Senator Mazayo, you are one of very experienced judges.
Yes.
You should know that you can make a statement in either of the 2 languages, but you cannot read what has not been approved by the Speaker. So if it's what was approved by the Speaker was in English, stick to English.
I stand guarded, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thought it would be better if I spoke in my language where my people whom I represent in the Senate would understand. But however, I still stand guided. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order number 47, Sub-Rule 1, I rise to make a statement on the issue of countrywide concern, namely the rape and the cold-blooded murder of a minor, namely Margaret Shukrani Masha, on the 4th of February 2020 at Bamba Police Station in Bamba Ward in Kilifi County. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make this statement on behalf of the people, of the great people of Kilifi, who in their wisdom entrusted me with this position, and I hold utmost respect for them. The admiration, Mr. Speaker, for this Senate is unmatched. Mr. Speaker, on the evening of Tuesday, the 4th of February, at about 8 p.m., the residents of Kilifi County and a small town of Bamba, and in particular, the relatives and friends of Margaret Shukrani, were met with very devastating news that their girl, who was aged 17 years, was dead in a police state.
What is it,
Speaker,
Senator Wambua?
Mr. Speaker, I would hate to disrupt my brother, Senator Madzayo. Mr. Speaker, your own rules concerning sittings at this time clearly stipulate that we cannot approach the Speaker, that we limit movements within the chamber and consultations. The Speaker, have you relaxed those rules? Because I've sat here, seen a lot of consultations with the Speaker, a lot of consultations amongst ourselves, and we are complaining out there that Kenyans have relaxed and they have gone back to normal life. Mr. Speaker, kindly guide us. Thank you.
Yes, I think I have also observed one or two colleagues who have approached the chair. The general principle is that we should minimize that unless really it's an emergency. Or if it's an emergency, yes, you can approach from a distance, but let's minimize approaching the chair as one of the measures. In fact, instead of approaching the chair, you can start on a point of order unless it's really, really an emergency or is private. Very well. Senator Madzayo. Senator Madzayo, you are finished?
Not yet, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you are still...
I finished giving the direction.
I'm much obliged. Mr. Speaker, last year, in 2019, the late Margaret had been defiled by unknown persons. But investigations conducted, some suspects were arrested. And they were taken to court and charged, and the matter was coming up for hearing. Mr. Speaker, in the evening of the 4th, the late Margaret, in the company of her own mother, went to Bamba Police Station to meet up with a police officer concerned with the investigation that the matter was coming up on the 5th, who was handling this matter. Because they wanted to borrow that, to ask for a lift, as they could not afford the fees, the fare to travel to Kilifi, Lokots, which is approximately about 50 kilometers away. Mr. Speaker, it was unfortunate that to the surprise of everyone in the company of her mother that the police directed that the girl stays back in the cell and the mother goes home together with her relatives. They complained about that because they did not know the reason why the girl should stay behind. But well, as the police had already ordered them to leave the station, Mr. Speaker, the poor lady or the mother had to leave. At around 8 p.m., in the same evening, the mother was contacted through the neighbors, and she was told that her daughter Margaret had died in that police cell. Family and friends quickly rushed to the police station, and upon arrival, there was a police van. The police van was carrying the body of Margaret, and it was leaving for Kilifi County Hospital mortuary. The relatives attempted to stop the vehicle, but all efforts to do that, they couldn't. They had carried the body, and they didn't want the relatives to see the body, neither the mother nor the friends around. And the vehicle, the police vehicle, had to leave without the mother having seen the body of her own daughter, the dead body of her daughter. Mr. Speaker, on February 9th, that is about 4 days thereafter, I, together with the distinguished senator for Mombasa, Honorable Faki, who is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, we visited the police station, Bamba Police Station, to find out the circumstances surrounding the death of the late Margaret. Mr. Speaker, at the police station, we were shown a photograph which was taken through a phone camera. And it was alleged that the lady had committed suicide by hanging herself. Mr. Speaker, that photo raised many questions. Because one cannot hang themselves with a rope that is shorter than they are. Mr. Speaker, the doors where she was hanging on were shorter. The door where she was hanging on was an ordinary door, a police cell. And this girl was hanging there with a hijab, but her feet were touching the ground, meaning thereby that it was not possible for one to hang when you are stepping on the ground. Mr. Speaker, those who handled the body at the mortuary can recall the miner's clothes were torn, and her body was mixed with her private parts, basically were oozing with blood. And however, it is so sad, Mr. Speaker, that we made several calls to see the OCS of Bamba police station, one Mr. Titus Mwasia, but he wasn't prepared to meet the mother. Incidentally, Mr. Speaker, when the OCS attempted so much to ask the mother to go to the police station so that he would be able to convince her that she had committed suicide, the mother refused and decided that unless an autopsy or postmortem was done to confirm what led to the death of her daughter. Mr. Speaker, Kilifi County government took the services of Dr. Johansen Oduor so that he would be able to conduct a postmortem report and find out what killed Margaret. But unfortunately, that postmortem report, by the time they were taking that, the body was released to the family to go and bury, that postmortem report had not arrived. Mr. Speaker, it is also painful to know that 3 months or 4 months from up to now, that Dr. Johansen Oduor has not released the postmortem results. Mr. Speaker, one of the most important things we should know, the cardinal rule, is that life belongs to the state. And as I stand here, we want the government to take decisive action against the police of Bamba Police Station with regards to this incident that happened and led to the death of the young girl. Mr. Speaker, I want to seek your indulgence in this matter, pursuant to the Standing Orders 47, subsection 3, that this statement be referred to the Standing Committee on National Security and Defense and Foreign Relations to investigate the circumstances that led to the death of Margaret. Mr. Speaker, there are several questions that are yet to be answered. Why did the police detain the 17-year-old girl in a cell against the provisions of the Children's Act and any other law in Kenya? Mr. Speaker, number 2, that the offense that the minor had, an offense that the minor had committed so that the police would be able to detain her should be disclosed, because they had gone there to seek for transport, to be taken to the police, to be taken to Kilifi law courts, to be able to give their evidence with regards to this rape that had taken place and which had already been recorded in the police abstract of Kilifi and Bamba, and the case was coming up the following day. Mr. Speaker,
you've taken too long, Senator Masayo.
I'm just concluding, Mr. Speaker.
Please
I'm
stop,
just concluding, Mr.
because
Speaker.
you should not take more than 10 minutes on one statement.
Mr. Speaker, we want to know who are the police officers that committed this crime. And finally, Mr. Speaker, we want to know why has the postmortem report not been released up to now. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. I direct the Security Committee, National Security and Defense Committee, to investigate that matter in liaison with Senator Masayo and provide a report. So ordered. The next statement is by Senator Maura, not in. Senator Maura, deferred. Next, Senator Kasanga. Seeking a statement regarding NHIF.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 48-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Health concerning the operations of the National Hospital Insurance Fund, NHIF. In the statement, the committee should explain the factors leading to the decline in growth of the NHIF that led the scheme to posting a loss during the year of 2019. State the measures, if any, that have been put in place to ensure contributions by public towards the fund are not pilfered, and that there is no disruption in payment of benefits to members in light of the challenges currently being faced by the NHIF. 3, provide information on funds deposit from member vis-a-vis honored and pending claims raised by hospitals arising from medical services provided to members of the scheme during the last 2 years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, thank you. That's how it should be. Health Committee, Senator Mbito is not here. I'll also exercise discretion in that matter and ask the Health Committee to deal with that issue in 2 weeks. Provide a response to the House. In 2 weeks, NHIF is a sensitive health issue. Next, Senator Paul Mwangi Githiomi, Senator for Nyandarua is not in, deferred. Next, Senator Kwamboka, deferred on the request of the Senator. Next, Senator Fatuma Dulo, MP, to seek a statement on challenges experienced in Isiolo County relating to COVID-19 pandemic.
Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 48-1 to seek statement from the Standing Committee on Health on the challenges currently experienced in Isiolo County relating to COVID-19 pandemic. In the statement, the committee should ascertain the legitimacy of the alleged launch of the 13 intensive care unit and high dependency unit beds, ventilators, by the Governor of Isiolo County on 12th April 2020. Number 2, investigate the alleged intimidation of the Isiolo County resident by the officials after the circulated video and photographic evidence on open source media showing the said 13 beds being transported from Galaxy Hospital Annex, a local private hospital, to the Isiolo Referral Hospital. Number 3, conduct an inquiry into Isiolo County executive expenditure on the 40 million allocated for COVID-19 virus preparedness and make the findings public. Finally, explain the measures the committee intends to put in place to ensure transparency and accountability in the counties during the COVID-19 pandemic response. I thank you.
Well done. Senator Sakaja, you have heard what Senator Dulo has said. Pursue it in the context of the ongoing mandate, and in your reports, which are weekly, you can cover that issue. Next, Senator for Bungoma County, Senator Wetangula is not in, it's deferred. Next, Senator for Vihiga County, Senator Khaniri.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 48, I rise to seek a statement from the chairperson of the Committee on National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations concerning the increased incidents of burglaries and general insecurity in the country during the nationwide curfew. There has been a number of robbery incidences all around Kenya, and Vihiga is no exception. Mr. Speaker, on the 14th April 2020, 3 thugs were killed by angry villagers in Chandumba village because of robbery cases. On 24th of April 2020, 3 different killings happened in the Chamakanga, Busali ward, and in the same month, 2 more killings and robberies have happened in Shamahoho and Mago of Vihiga County. Therefore, in the statement, the chairperson should explain, number 1, the reason for increased incidents of burglaries and robberies during the curfew period throughout the country, yet there would be an expected improvement in security as nobody is allowed outside except the police. Number 2, what measures the Inspector General of Police is undertaking to address the increased reports of burglaries, some of which are allegedly committed by members of the disciplined forces, and what they are doing to improve security in Vihiga County, especially in market centers where break-ins have become rampant. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well done. Pero, Senator Gidiomi, you're back. You can seek your statement.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
What is it, Senator Handiri?
Mr. Speaker, I expected, like you did to all the other statements, you refer this
You
to
didn't
the
ask.
committee and
You didn't ask, did you? So I exercised my discretion against what you are saying because you never asked. Senator Mazayo asked.
Mr. Speaker, Senator Mazayo was under 47-1.
Yes.
I am under 48. Go through 48, Mr. Speaker. I'm requesting a statement
Are you
from a
trying
chairperson.
is your statement?
Yes, 48.
Meaning it's mandatory?
Yes. Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'm requesting a statement from the chairperson, and therefore it is mandatory that it be referred to a committee.
So you are
and
under
I would wish,
40
and I would wish
you are
that,
under
Mr.
40
Speaker, you give some time limits on the response.
So which position, which part of the standing order are you applying? Because what I have is different.
Mr. Speaker,
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, this is 48 part 3, where a statement has been requested from a committee pursuant to paragraph 1, the Speaker may allow comments in relation to the statement. The committee may invite the senator who requested. The Speaker may allow the senator who made the statement under paragraph 1 or any other senator to make comments. So, Mr. Speaker, 48.3.
There is no basis, Senator Kaniri. I know what I'm saying. I apply this standing order daily whenever we are sitting. So I'm looking for the part which you are saying, as you claim, mandates or directs the Speaker to mandatorily refer the statement to your committee. It's the chair to take over the matter.
It is okay, Mr. Speaker,
but you can make a special request.
Yes, I'm making a request,
If you
Mr.
want the
Speaker.
chair to perhaps support your statement additionally, but don't make it appear mandatory. That's my point.
Mr. Speaker, what else would it mean if a senator requests for a statement from a chairman of a committee, Mr. Speaker?
Yeah, the chair notes the request and takes up the matter suo motu.
So my point was...
Unless a senator makes some of you does, or the chair in his own motion decides also to, as I did with regard to Senator Sylvia Kasanga's issue, because of the widespread nature of NHIF and so forth. So anyway, instead of too much ado, where is the chairperson? But I hope, President Kadiri, you have understood the argument I'm making. 48 anticipates that the chairperson of the committee automatically, without being moved or directed.
Yes.
But
Mr.
on
Speaker,
request,
I'm properly guided.
Yeah.
But my request to you was that I would wish that you treat it the same way you treated Senator Kasanga's statement, by giving some timelines as to when the chairperson can respond. Because if you don't do that, Mr. Speaker,
yes,
this statement will be with the committee even for 6 months.
no,
And
this should not take. This is our security issue. It cannot take more than 2 weeks. Where is the chair? Security committee, where are you? Chairperson, vice chairperson, member. Order. Do we have any member of the National Security Committee? Majority leader. Deputy majority leader. Order. 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 Order, Senator Wambua. Order. I said order. The House has only one majority leader at a time. So don't bring newspaper issues here. Order. Do we have the majority leader? Deputy majority leader? Any chairperson from the majority side? On behalf of the majority leader?
Mr. Speaker, we'll bring this to the attention of the committee so that they can expedite the response required by the member.
In 2 weeks,
In 2
provide
weeks.
the response in 2 weeks to
We
Senator
will bring
Hanil.
that information to their attention.
In
Speaker.
14 days,
Thank you.
yes. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Mahmoud. I think we are done with statements. Senator Hidiomi? Oh, we
Thank
interrupted
Mr.
you.
Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 48-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security, Defense, and Foreign Relations regarding the alarming wave of unresolved murder cases at Oljorok constituency, Nyandarua County, in the last 6 months. Mr. Speaker, there has been a wave of crime and in Nyandarua County, and particularly in Oljorok and Daragwa sub-counties. Mr. Speaker, these are criminals who are specializing in the murder of women and children. They are organized criminals, Mr. Speaker. They first rape women and eventually engage in cold-blood murder of the same women that they have raped, and they also kill their children. Mr. Speaker, it is the responsibility of any government in power to take care of life and property of its citizenry. Mr. Speaker, we have had this problem in the last 6 months, and we are wondering what the police in Kenya are doing, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Article 29 of our Constitution guarantees the freedom and security of every Kenyan. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm alarmed by the wave of the murders in our county, and especially the Oljoro constituency over the last few months, which largely remains unresolved to date. Mr. Speaker, what's even more worrying is that these crimes have been meted against innocent women, mostly helpless single women. First, they are raped and then murdered. It is also worth noting that nothing is normally stolen from the victims. Mr. Speaker, sir, here are some of the cases that have happened in the last 6 months. Mr. Speaker, on the 5th of November, 2019, at Oljorok Gardens, Kaguo sublocation, around 7 p.m., a lady commonly known as Mama Brian and her sister Agnes were attacked by unknown assailants who hacked them to death. Nothing was stolen from them. Mr. Speaker, on the 23rd of November, 2019, Mary Mwododhi, a Nyandarua County government employee from a village called Heshima, while going home around 9 p.m., was attacked, raped, and killed by unknown people, and nothing was stolen from the deceased. Mr. Speaker, on 10th December 2019, Mary Nyabura Masharia, a casual laborer from Munada village, was raped and then murdered while going home around 7:30 in the evening, and nothing was stolen from her. Mr. Speaker, early this year in Amani village, Alice Wajiro's house was dug into by unknown people who raped her and then murdered her. Nothing was stolen from her house. Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago in Shakareli village, Eunice Mudhoni and her daughter, Lynette Jerry, were both raped and then murdered after their assailants dug their way into their house. Eunice, 2 sisters who were also present during the incident, were also raped and are now admitted in hospital with stab wounds that they sustained during the ordeal, and nothing was stolen from their house. Mr. Speaker, sir, on 26th of April, unknown attackers broke into Margaret Wairimu Bogo's house and killed her and her son, James. Nothing was stolen from their house. Mr. Speaker, sir, it's worth noting that these cases, it's women who have been victims, and that none of the reported cases have been resolved. These people, Mr. Speaker, today have not been, nobody has been taken to court. So, Mr. Speaker, our request as Nyandarua residents is that most of the police in Oljorok, the security officers in Oljorok sub-county and Daragwa sub-county should be removed from their workplaces. They have overstayed and they have relaxed, and I think that is why we are having all these murders, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are even fearing going around our businesses in the county, because if people can be killed, cases have been reported to police station and nothing is happening, one wonders. Mr. Speaker, there is also one police constable, an administration constable, who was caught stealing electrical poles at Olkalau. He was caught red-handed, taken to police station, and he was not taken to court, up to date. The CID said, the CID set him free. They did not investigate the case, and one wonders what kind of country that we are living in. These things never used to happen before. Kenya has become completely insecure. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the statement, the committee, the Security Committee should explain steps taken by the security agencies to bring to book the perpetrators of these murders in the constituencies, given that there are several unresolved murder cases reported in the last 6 months. 2, outline measures, if any, that the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government has put in place to ensure that the residents of Oljorok and Daragwa feel secure, especially due to the fact that the recent cases of murder have happened at night when the curfew restriction is in place, because they cannot take care of themselves, they cannot secure themselves. We are having curfew, and there's no step that is being taken. Mr. Speaker, that state the progress. The Security Committee should state the progress made by security agencies towards investigations into and resolution of all murders reported at Oljoro constituency police station over the last 6 months, and the status of each case. Mr. Speaker, if the police cannot secure...
You have made your point, Senator Gidiomi.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Senator Mohamud, likewise bring this matter to the attention of the National Security Committee. With the same time frame of 2 weeks, there must be a response shared with the Senator.
Much obliged, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. What is it, Senator Sakaja?
Mr. Speaker, I seek your directions. This House has 67 senators. Due to Corona, members always try to fight for space to be in the designated list of only 28, Mr. Speaker. If you look around, Mr. Speaker, as you said, no majority leader, no minority leader. No majority whip, no minority whip. Less than a quarter of those designated to sit. Mr. Speaker, I urge that you give direction on that, because really we are not being fair to the people being represented and to the senators who are not able to make it or who have not been given that slot to come, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Sakaja. I will give directions straight away. That the Senate is meeting in extraordinary times. And in these circumstances, we are not able to attend the sittings of the House, all of us, as is the case, until the situation is normalized. Any senator who, in the normal way, has been recommended by their party leaders, including the party leaders themselves, who is supposed to be in a sitting during these special circumstances and does not appear without having notified the chair, without having notified the speaker, the House will take sanctions against such a senator. Indeed, if a senator has been identified and notified that they have been selected to be in the sitting, and something happens and they are not able to sit, they must communicate that immediately to their party leaders and to the speaker with a view of getting a replacement. We cannot have empty seats. Yet I know there are senators who have been struggling through their parties to get a slot to come to this House. So any senator who causes the House to have an empty seat, when Corona has also caused many of our seats to be empty, will be guilty of a misdemeanor and will be dealt with accordingly. Thank you, Senator Sakaja. What is it, Senator Rose Nyamunga?
Mr. Speaker, in light of that, I don't know if it would be wrong for me to suggest that, is it possible that members are allowed on the interest basis? Because it will not be right for us to come here, sit, we have a lot of business to transact, but then we have empty chairs, Mr. Speaker.
We'll have that directed to the Senate Business Committee, but that is a good suggestion, which should be considered in the next SBC sitting, because right now we are using the political parties to suggest based on, so many interests. Because if we go solely by way of interest, then you are likely to see maybe senators from one corner of the country or one gender or one political party, it might be difficult, but the point is simple. If through your party you have been processed to attend, you must attend. And if you cannot attend, you must notify the speaker in good time and a replacement sought, period. I think there is no debate about that. Senator Wambua?
I just wanted to say the same thing that Senator Rosa said, with the slight amendment, Chair, that in the National Assembly, if we can also borrow a leaf from them, Mr. Speaker, the sitting is preserved for first come, first served basis, so that the sittings are open for all senators, and the first 28 who get in, then transact the business of the House. If that can also be taken to the SBC for consideration, the Chair.
Very well. Very well. Thank you. Thank you. Senator Ochilo Ayako, we need to put this behind us.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of order, not on that matter, but to plead with you. The security issue that was raised by Senator Githiomi touched me, and I wanted you to just allow something I observed. It appears from the narrative of Senator Githiomi that there is negligence, there is abdication by police in that part of the world. you heard the litany and the gruesome manner in which innocent women were murdered. Would I be in order to ask you to include in part of the directive that disciplinary processes be instituted with a view to demoting the responsible commanding officers in those areas? We cannot have a situation where people are killed and killed and killed, and then all we are asking is for a report. So the committee dealing with it, Mr. Speaker, should also come to us with information as to what disciplinary action, including demotion, that should be meted out against these police and dismissal police officers who have authority, who have intel, and who have guns and cells, and are doing nothing as our people get murdered. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. I direct that the additional issue raised by Senator Chilo Ayako, unless Senator Gidiomi has an objection,
Mr. Speaker, sir, I have no objection.
You have no objection.
It's quite good.
Yeah, it's being included as well, so that the committee should recommend, in the event of any officer being found to have been negligent or culpable in any manner or acted unlawfully, I direct the committee to suggest measures against and sanctions to be carried out against such officers. Concrete measures. Next order.
Order number 8, the Livestock and Livestock Products Marketing Board Bill, National Assembly Bill number 2 of 2019, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to establish the Livestock and Livestock Products Marketing Board and for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 9, the Pandemic Response and Management Bill, Senate Bills number 6 of 2020, second reading.
Chairperson, Ad hoc Committee on COVID-19 Situation in Kenya. Senator Sakaja. Very well. Mover. Oh, you also want to move electronically?
We are paperless, Mr. Speaker.
All right.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move the Pandemic Response and Management Bill, Senate Bills number 6 of 2020, to be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, the bill was read the first time on the 21st of April, 2020, and committed to the Ad hoc Committee on COVID-19 situation in Kenya to facilitate public participation, and a call for public memorandum was placed in the local dailies on the 22nd and 23rd of April 2020, which closed on the 1st of May 2020. And before I go into the detail of the bill, allow me just to give a brief background on the publication. As you're aware, Mr. Speaker, on 31st of March 2020, the Ad hoc Committee on the COVID-19 situation was established here in Senate. And we were tasked with several matters to address, including the financial assistance to vulnerable persons and groups, the protection of residential and commercial tenants, protection of employees from job losses, and the easing of legislative and regulatory requirements for doing business. That was part of our mandate, sir. Mr. Speaker, I've severally reported, well, we have as a committee severally reported in the House every week since the establishment of the committee. And before embarking on this task of the bill, Mr. Speaker, we were able to frame all the issues that were given to the committee into 5 thematic areas. And these were the health area, the health issues, economic and financial issues, social order, public order and human rights issues, access to food, water and other basic commodities, and support services and cross-cutting issues like ICT and others. So after we identified these thematic areas, Mr. Speaker, we then invited members from the public to come and give us, their views and their feelings on the issues of COVID-19 under these thematic areas that we had formed. And the response was overwhelming, Mr. Speaker. We had over 160 submissions coming in, and we still have a few more still coming in. And I want to really thank all the organizations and persons, individuals, members of parliament who came forth with this request that we had given them, because it is upon this basis that the bill was formed. So when we received the views from the public, we did a comparative study on how other jurisdictions around the globe had responded to the pandemic, and especially on issues of policy and legislation. And the committee resolved that it was imperative to have a legislation. It was the only method we could see that would have the future at heart, something that was for posterity. And Mr. Speaker, our proposal to come up with the legislation should not be construed to mean that the government of the day has failed in handling the COVID-19 pandemic. Actually, very far from it, Mr. Speaker. We have engaged various ministries and government agencies, and we've been brought to speed on up-to-date issues on what they're dealing with. And the social dialogue extended to private partners, we commend the government's effort in trying to avert the pandemic, Mr. Speaker. And by proposing this bill, we just want to make it easier and seamless next time by putting the structures in place. Mr. Speaker, a pandemic is a rare phenomenon, and the nature and characteristic of a pandemic is not predictable. And the measures needed to manage, they may vary from one pandemic to another. And history has shown that pandemics have so far bombarded the world, ranging from plagues, smallpox, to different strains of flu, and they've been overcome by, embracing varied measures, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, having a straitjacket legislation may not just be effective. And this is why we notice that the bill proposes measures that are not too restrictive in order to give that wiggling room that is necessary, depending on the nature of the pandemic that, God forbid, we may face again. And then after publication of the bill and close of submission of public memorandum 1st of May 2020, we have so far received 64 submissions on the bill, Mr. Speaker, from organizations and from individuals. And fellow senators have also had immense support. We've had submissions from Senator Beth Mugo and Senator Ochilo. We want to thank them very much. In fact, we shall be inviting them to address the committee on this issue. Having said that, I will go through some of the provisions of the bill, Mr. Speaker. The bill is proposing a declaration of a pandemic as a beginning. The bill, it proposes that the President, in consultation with the National Security Council, may issue a gazette notice to declare a pandemic, Mr. Speaker. And the same would happen at the end of the pandemic. With the same consultation, then you would mark the end of the pandemic. And this basically brings into effect this bill. We are talking about national and county government committees, Mr. Speaker, that once the bill has been declared, the bill will provide a mechanism for a coordinated response by national and county governments. It provides for the establishment of ad hoc national pandemic response committee once the pandemic has been declared, and the committee is required to spearhead the implementation of activities geared towards preventing the spread and mitigating against a negative impact. Mr. Speaker, the detailed functions of this committee are listed there in clause 9 of the bill. It is also proposed that the committee be chaired by the cabinet secretary who is responsible for health matters. Pandemics are about health. So we are talking about, just as you have seen currently what they have done, in the same breath is what the bill is proposing. And the membership of the committee shall include the chairperson of Council of Governors or a person designated in writing, the principal secretary responsible for finance, and other cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, public officers that the president may deem necessary, depending also on the nature of the pandemic. The committee is at liberty to co-opt other membership. Yeah, this was very clear because, as you can see, it can't just be one standing committee. There has to be other subcommittees and, dealing with all the various issues, and persons who, with knowledge and skills, and are found necessary for effective of performance. So it may not even necessarily be government entities. It could be also other stakeholders who are conversant with the issues. This particular committee is required during the pandemic to submit reports to Parliament. And this is somewhere where we have seen currently is not quite happening, but in the future we are proposing in the bill that this committee submits to Parliament reports every 2 weeks. The reports detailing the nature of the infection or the rate of the infection, the measures undertaken to mitigate the pandemic, challenges faced in mitigating the pandemic, and the provision will ensure that Parliament is kept abreast on emerging issues without necessarily having to write or to summon the relevant cabinet secretaries as we are doing, and knowing that it's a challenge because they are busy, and at the same time we want these updates to keep coming. So this part of the bill is to mitigate this challenge. Then within a month after the end of the pandemic, once it has been declared an end, within a month the committee, that same committee should submit a final or exit report to Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Now, in the same breath as is happening at the national level, the county governments are required to collaborate with and complement the efforts of the national government in responding to a pandemic. Mr. Speaker, we've already seen some of this happening in some of the counties, but again, now we are putting it here in the bill, and to facilitate this, the bill proposes a framework for the establishment of the County Pandemic Response Committee in each county. Similar to the committee at national level, these committees shall be ad hoc committees, Mr. Speaker, established by the county governor in order to implement the strategies that have been rolled out at the national level, and also to promote the civic education. As you've seen, Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 already has so much stigma to it, and the stigma adds to the challenge in dealing with it. So civic education becomes very critical and is a function at county government. And the details of the functions of the county committees are listed under clause 15. It is also proposed, Mr. Speaker, that the county committee shall be chaired by the county executive committee responsible for health, and the membership shall include county commissioners and other county public officers that may be necessary. Just like the national committee, the committee may co-opt experts where necessary. Then the county committees, they mimic the committee at national level in various aspects required during the pandemic to submit reports to the relevant county assemblies, ever so often as at national level, which is 2 weeks. Mr. Speaker, we have proposed the Pandemic Response Fund. This has received quite a bit of interest from our stakeholders and from interested persons who have submitted, and is an area which as a committee we are still looking at critically. But there cannot be no fund for many reasons, Mr. Speaker. The bill proposes the establishment of the fund whenever a declaration of a pandemic is done. And the fund would serve as a pool of resources for ensuring that there's adequate resources towards gearing the spread and the mitigation against the impact of the pandemic. And the fund is to be administered by the principal secretary responsible for matters relating to finance. And it's expected to be wound up 2 months when the pandemic is declared to have ended. This is under clause 20 of the bill. Under socioeconomic protection, Mr. Speaker, the bill proposes temporary relief measures to those who are adversely affected by the pandemic bill. And this is an area that has also created a lot of interest from citizens and stakeholders, members of parliament alike. You'll find these socioeconomic protection under clauses 25 running through to 34 of the bill. Some of the proposals include national government and county governments being required to put in place social safety measures designed to support vulnerable persons, vulnerable households, the informal sector workers, whose incomes have been disrupted by the pandemic, Mr. Speaker. And such schemes include the cash transfers that are identified, to the identified groups of people. Then the relevant national and county government agencies may, during a pandemic, waive water and electricity charges for identified vulnerable persons and households in consultation with water and electricity service providers. You know, Mr. Speaker, I have to read this very carefully because a lot of people have really misinterpreted the spirit of what we want to do in this section of the bill, and I'm sure the chairman, Senator Sakaja, will give a highlight on some of these issues. So where a pandemic affects the financial capacity of a tenant to meet their obligations, the tenant shall give a notice in writing to the landlord and that they are unable to meet their obligation because of the pandemic, and upon receipt of that notice, the parties shall enter into agreement. Again, Mr. Speaker, I know the chairman will speak to this because it has brought a lot of controversy. In fact, once the bill was published, we even had to go on air to just make, to clarify what the bill intends to do, because it had raised quite a lot of issues. Where pandemic adversely affects the ability of an employer to pay salaries, another very controversial area. Notwithstanding the provisions of the Employment Act, an employer shall not terminate the contract of a service or dismiss an employee or coerce an employee to take a salary cut. However, the employer shall permit the employee to take leave of absence, for instance, without pay for duration of the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, again, this is an area which we are expecting also still a lot more submissions to come on this for us to deliberate as a committee. And we are expecting also the fraternities that handle matters of employment also to come forward and give their submissions on this so that we can continue fine-tuning and seeing the best way possible, Mr. Speaker. Statistics from the current pandemic have shown that revenues have really dropped, Mr. Speaker. And part of the reason we are hearing all the crime that is going on is part of the reason why our pockets, Mr. Speaker, are significantly empty. And people who are not even in the vulnerable category are slipping into a vulnerable section of our citizens, Mr. Speaker. Most industries, especially the hospitality, are very hard hit. When we spoke to some of these people, Mr. Speaker, it is very heartbreaking to see people in the transport sector, in the tourism transport sector, have grounded their vehicles. The drivers are grounded. We don't know when tourism is going to pick up again. It's estimated that it may take up to 2022 to see, tourism picking up from where it is. So these are really critical conversations that need to be had beforehand. Where pandemic affects the financial ability of a borrower and the respective lending institution shall enter into agreement to review repayment modalities and penalties. And Mr. Speaker, this we've seen already happening. In a committee, we've had conversations with the Bankers Association. We've had conversations with the central bank governor, and we know a lot of people with loans have already gone to their banks to have their loans restructured, and the central bank has given a few reprieves to ensure that the citizens are cushioned from extra charges that come from some of these conversations. So again, we are putting in these structures here so that in future, we don't have to start digging up again, what do we do, or what did we do then and we need to do now. County governments may suspend fees payable for renewable trade licenses and payment of property rates during the pandemic. Again, another proposal. Mr. Speaker and honorable senators, these are not exhaustive provisions. And I know we may need to rephrase them even as we go ahead with the bill. And we may need to even include a few other provisions here so that we don't abuse anyone. The employer is a critical part of this economy as much as is the employee. So is the landlord, who is also very critical in our economy, as is the tenant. So all of them have to be cushioned from the effects of the pandemic, Mr. Speaker. We've received a lot of proposals dealing with statutory timelines that some of them may have not been canvassed in the bill, but we intend to take them on board. Like for instance, when the Ministry of Lands has suspended, issuance of certain paperwork that would enable land transactions to happen, and such transactions are time-bound, then what happens? So again, we've been receiving some of these coming in, and we are still looking at them. Under the miscellaneous matters, the bill makes it an offense to misuse funds meant to alleviate effects of the pandemic. It also makes it an offense to spread false information. It also makes it an offense not to follow directives that have been given by the relevant authorities under this bill. That one we have canvassed, Mr. Speaker, and you've seen how, our police forces are really struggling with enforcement measures. As it may not be possible to envisage all matters that we need under the legislative solution during the pandemic, the bill gives a leeway to cabinet secretaries in charge of various dockets to make regulations whenever the need arises. Like I said, Mr. Speaker, earlier, we are not being prescriptive in this bill, but we are giving, a framework that we can follow in the event of, God forbid, other pandemics that may come. Mr. Speaker, the committee is currently considering all the submissions that we have received, and we are having a lot of remote meetings with stakeholders that have been submitted, that, stakeholders who have brought in their memorandum. On Friday, 8th May 2020, we had a meeting with the Law Society of Kenya and Coulson Honey. They had been, they had presented some very weighty issues, like I had mentioned, especially issues of timelines on, some of those issues that I mentioned on the Ministry of of lands and stuff like that. We intend to take in more stakeholders, including senators and members of parliament, before wrapping up on all our proposals. And we will be proposing also a raft of amendments at committee stage, because we believe we want to strengthen the bill and make it also easy for implementation, Mr. Speaker. In conclusion, I want to thank your office profusely, and I want to thank the Office of the Clerk of Senate for extending the committee a lot of support. We have an incredible secretariat. They're working round the clock, Mr. Speaker. Their reports, you will see our reports are very detailed, Mr. Speaker, because we are having a lot of consultations in a short while, but they're able to capture all our conversations, all our recommendations, and even the work they have done on the bill, given the timeline. We have to commend the Legislative Office for what they have done and what they continue to do, Mr. Speaker. So we thank you so much for that support. And Mr. Speaker, allow me now to call my chair, Senator Sakaja, to second the bill. Thank you.
But you have not moved it. You have to move it, Senator
I actually
Skasanga.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move.
Yes, and then?
I beg to move that.
And thereafter?
And I request Senator Sakaja to second.
Well done.
Thank
Well
you.
done, Senator Kasanga. You have come from far since the days of the shoe debacle. Senator Sakaja.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I deliberately asked my very able Vice Chair to move this bill. I believe in opportunities, and I agree with you that she has done a remarkable job. She's also been doing a very good job leading this committee.
You should add that you are also a product of opportunities.
I am also, in fact, I'm a product of opportunities.
Absolutely.
Since 2013, and I am still learning. Mr. Speaker, I rise to second this bill. And, earlier, Mr. Speaker, I had mentioned that it's a special day. In 1820, one lady called Florence Nightingale was born on this day, 12th of May. Florence Nightingale was an English social reformer. She was a statistician, and she was the founder of modern nursing. She came to prominence managing nurses during the Crimean War and gave the profession of nursing, status. And she was an icon at that time during the Victorian culture. Mr. Speaker, so apart from, my daughter Emily Sakaja, who was born today, she turns 1 today, and Florence Nightingale, who was born in 1820, it's a special day, and it's International Nurses Day. So it is very poetic that on this International Nurses Day, we are moving a bill on a pandemic where our nurses have come out as a front line of defense and are doing an amazing job, and we pray that God may continue to bless our nurses, our doctors, our lab technicians, and all those Kenyans who are working tirelessly, putting their lives on the line as we fight coronavirus. Mr. Speaker, a pandemic is not a normal occurrence. Mr. Speaker, a pandemic, in fact, there is no one listening to my voice across the country or in this house who was alive when there was another global pandemic of this nature, which was in the 1920s, Mr. Speaker. And because of that, Mr. Speaker, the committee that this house saw fit to establish felt that it is important for us to have a special legislative framework on how to deal with a pandemic. During a pandemic, it is not business as usual. It cannot be business as usual. And that's why some of the proposals that we've put here have attracted, might look even a bit controversial. But it is not usual times, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, during a pandemic, certain luxuries have to be forfeited. It has a huge impact on the economy. Already we're feeling the pinch at individual level as a country. And in the report that I've tabled today on our 5th progress report, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the state of our economy, indeed, we're looking at projections of GDP growth of 2.5%, down from 5.6. And in fact, the realistic projection is 1.8. It has a huge impact on everyday lives. Our lives are not the same. We are here wearing masks, looking like bank robbers. We are meeting virtually. We are meeting on Zoom. And Mr. Speaker,
I thought you can't get a better example, Senator Sakaja. I thought you would say looking like surgeons.
Looking like surgeons.
Especially Senator Githiomi, who also has
Yes.
gloves on
He has
his
gloves.
hands. Yes.
In fact, others are wearing even
Because
the headgear.
The robe thing
Yeah.
is looking untidy. Okay.
But Mr. Speaker, indeed, these are peculiar times. But as I've said, every cloud has a silver lining. The world is reshaping how it operates. My committee, which I chair, this ad hoc committee, has been able to conduct in a month more than 45 sittings. This is unprecedented. 45 sittings in a month. Mr. Speaker, we meet online. Senator Midhika Linturi might be in Meru on a Miratri, while Senator Munyihaji is in Mombasa. While Senator Kasanga has been joining our meetings from Machakos, Senator Okongo Mugeni is elsewhere. And we've been able to have 100% attendance in our committees. Mr. Speaker, you have been in leadership. I have chaired committees since 2013. I have never seen 100% attendance continuously in this way. So every cloud has a silver lining, and we're imagining we are doing more cashless transactions, and so we take every challenge in stride. Mr. Speaker, as my very able vice chair said, because of the, how big this mandate is and the effects of coronavirus, we narrowed down to 5 areas, and we've been looking at those areas critically. And I'm glad to say that we've made tremendous, progress in many of those issues that came up from the beginning, and ministers have been coming, they've been attending, and they've been resolving those issues. We've listened to stakeholders. I want to thank Kenyans. Kenyans are an amazing people. On top of resilience, Kenyans care about their country. If you look at the level, the amount, and the quality of submissions that ordinary Kenyans, institutions have brought to us, more than 160 of them appearing in our meetings. We've spoken to ordinary nurses and doctors in the counties, and that's why I thank the technology. We were able to have a meeting where we had a nurse in Kakamega, another one in, I think, Meru, and another one in Coast, at the same time telling us what things are. Because in Swahili, Mr. Speaker, we say, and I quote, vitu kwa ground ni different. So sometimes, Mr. Speaker, end quotes, sometimes, Mr. Speaker, the cabinet secretary or government officials might give you one side of the story, but in the same meeting, you have the ordinary mwananchi saying that one we have not heard of. And so we get, progress and closure on many of those issues. Mr. Speaker, I want to single out the legal fraternity. A lot of law firms have come to us at the LSK, and I want to single out Bowman's, Coulson Honey. They came and looked at our proposals. They gave us a raft of amendments. We discussed it, and Mr. Speaker, based on that, and we have, we have friends there, Evans Munari, Paras Shai, and the rest. The kind of interventions that they proposed, Mr. Speaker, are very practical. The Kenya Bankers Association, a sector that is really affected, were very pragmatic, saying, look, we will change 1 or 2 things. Yes, that makes sense. We are talking to our clients. Mr. Speaker, as of last week, that received more than 20,000 requests by clients to restructure loans amounting to 160 billion. And they said they've acceded to those requests. A pandemic is a time for Kenyans to come together. It's a time for leadership to come together. It's a time for everybody. You remember at the beginning, Mr. Speaker, when I opposed the adjournment of this House, I said that at a time of a pandemic or at a time of war, generals don't disappear. Generals must be in the front line. We can't say we go home as Senate, yet everybody else needs solution and oversight. And Mr. Speaker, after that, we've been able to see real generals in the name of members of this House, private citizens, public institutions, the Ministry of Health, and I want to single out Senator Mutahi Kagwe. When he came to the meeting, he insisted he is still Senator Mutahi Kagwe for the tremendous work they're doing. But I would like to reiterate that oversight has not been suspended. The rule of law has not been suspended. For anybody who assumes that the Constitution has been suspended at this point, it has not. And so we continue interacting with them. Even as we affirm them, we're still oversighting and tell them where things are not going well and where things need to be looked at. So, Mr. Speaker, on the health issues, this bill provides, as Senator Kasanga has said, for the setting up of that committee. This bill takes primacy when it's in operation. It is only in operation when the president has declared a pandemic. Now, there are World Health Organization protocols of how a pandemic is declared. Yeah. So the World Health Organization, based on its analysis, based on reports it gets from state parties, declares and writes and actually communicates to presidents of state parties. Now, what we provided for in the bill is that the National Security Council, on the advice of the Cabinet Secretary for Health, then recommends to the president the declaration of a pandemic. When the president then declares there's a pandemic, this bill takes effect. We also provide for when the president declares the pandemic is over, and this bill stops taking effect. So any other law at that point that is in contradiction to this, Mr. Speaker, you're a law professor, I cannot even try to tell you the doctrine of implied repeal or the doctrine of precedence or primacy of a law at the point of its application. At that point, if any other law is in contravention to this, and of course with the hierarchy of laws, that doesn't include the Constitution, then this takes effect and this takes full force, Mr. Speaker, at that time. Now these committees are set up and they are to include, the private sector told us, look, you're setting up a committee only of government, amend, and let us also be in there in case we are needed. And that's why I'm saying a lot of good proposals. In fact, after committee, the bill might look markedly different in many aspects. Then they can be co-opted during that time into this committee. And we saw that there's a challenge of coordination between national and county government. So the county governments also, this bill affirms that they must have a coordination mechanism with the national committee as well as their county committees. In the county committees, they will have a representative of national government through the county commissioner, and the national committee, the council of governors, is represented, and even political or rather parliamentary leaders can be represented to a certain extent, so as not to blur the lines of separation of powers, but also to benefit from the wealth and different experience and practice as it is. Mr. Speaker, a huge aspect of this bill is what we're calling social economic protection. It is extremely important. Mr. Speaker, right now during this time of curfew, in many towns and cities, a huge portion of our population cannot fend for themselves. And I'll give you a quick example. We have a night economy. So all those waiters and waitresses where restaurants have been closed, all those barmen, the bouncers, there's nothing to bounce now, during the day. There's no security to provide. Mr. Speaker, taxi drivers, Uber drivers, we spoke to them. Many, look at Kenya Airways. We have hundreds of, flight attendants, pilots who are not on pay right now. They need to be cushioned. There is no way, there's no two ways to think about it. And their cushioning, Mr. Speaker, is not just by sending food. Because, Mr. Speaker, we've seen there's a fallacy that the only people who need support are in slums. That is not true. Mr. Speaker, there are people who, and even many of us, without maybe two salaries, or if you miss a salary twice, there's a problem, and you will not find them in Kibera or Mathare only. You will find these people in Hurlingham, in Kilimani, you will find them in South Sea, you will find them in the villages, you will find them in places which normally would not be targeted through social assistance programs. We're saying they need to be cushioned through us cushioning the employers and through us cushioning business. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to report that in our interactions with the Treasury has told us that we've been able to find and secure, possibly by the end of June, 120 billion grant to create a wage subsidy fund. And that is in our report, Mr. Speaker. And that is a success of this committee. Because through that wage subsidy fund, Mr. Speaker, and I just like to state that before we came up with this bill, we've analyzed legislation from 50 countries. We've looked at what parliaments have been able to do. And I'm glad Senator Kasanga has mentioned how the level of professionalism our secretariat has, led by Charles Munywa and and Claire and Dr. Sagini. They have looked across the world and said, look, this is working in this country. Okay, this country is first world, but this other one is like us. Look at Argentina, look at Mexico, look at what Rwanda is doing, look at what South Korea has done. And we've been able to say that practically there are things we can do. Mr. Speaker, if today we have that fund of 120 billion to begin with, and a corporation or a business goes, because we've said, don't fire your workers. But we're not just cushioning your workers, we're also saying, look, we provide that fund such that you can be able to go to your bank and there is a concessional facility from government. And you can show that your turnovers in a similar month in the previous year, this is what you're earning. But because of Corona, you have not been able to earn this amount. Then you can get a concessional loan or even a grant, Mr. Speaker, to keep your people in jobs. We have to do that in a pandemic. This is not something to operate all the time, but during a pandemic, we must do that, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, we'll go into such deep recession that will take us more than 10 years to recover from as a country. Mr. Speaker, we've said that then that company or that organization can be able to show, first, through pay as you earn, these are the people who've been paying salaries, so that you don't lay them off. The bank has a relationship with you. The bank won't just give you money if they don't think you have the capacity to repay, or even to give you that grant if truly you don't deserve it. And at this time, Mr. Speaker, they should be able to access that small business support or business support. We've seen it. Of course, the US has a 2 trillion budget. We don't have a 2 trillion budget, but we're saying around 200 billion, Mr. Speaker. And I'm glad we've seen banks taking it up. I saw the National Chamber of Commerce and Industry together with Equity Bank, and I want to thank James Mwangi, saying that they're going to provide a facility of, I don't remember exactly how much, for their own clients who can demonstrate that loss of business during this time and also have the potential to be able to repay. Mr. Speaker, we put in a proposal there and said, you know, Mr. Speaker, as I've said before, it is very difficult to legislate empathy or common sense. It is very difficult to legislate good behavior and humanity. But, Mr. Speaker, we're saying if you are a landlord, Mr. Speaker, this is not the time to evict your tenant, but enter into an agreement with your tenant. Agree. Mr. Speaker, that provision is not just to cushion the tenant, but also the landlord. I've spoken to very many who are saying, okay, you're saying these people don't pay. No, that is not what we said. The media sensationalized that. We're not saying no one should pay, but we're saying get into an agreement, because even if your tenant is able to pay a certain portion for now, if they are paying 20,000, you agree, okay, for now pay 10, and then in the other months you will pay 15, or you'll pay something extra to recover it. It is better than having no tenant at all. I have many friends who own big buildings in this town who have told me, you know what, I just had to sit down with my tenants and ask them what is realistic. Because as it is, the real estate market itself was really suffering. So this tenant, or rather this landlord, having entered into an agreement with his tenant, can then now come and access that concessional facility within the bank. They should be able to access, you know, first of all, their mortgages must be suspended at that time if they're paying mortgages and pushed forward for that period of the pandemic, so that they also don't have obligations that they cannot meet because they're not getting the same amount of rental income they were getting. Other countries have gone to the extent of saying all evictions have been stopped. We are not going to that extent. We're saying get into an agreement, get into an understanding. I know for many people, that is the only source of income. I understand that full well. But they can be able to get support. It is easier for government to support 1,000 landlords than 100,000 tenants, Mr. Speaker. It is easier that way. And if the landlord is happy and has been cushioned, then the tenant will be happy. So in that provision, Mr. Speaker, where we said that the Cabinet Secretary shall create regulations to cushion both, we've decided as a committee, instead of leaving it blank, and instead of saying may, we're going to actually put in the specific provisions so that that is not abused, Mr. Speaker, and so that we have proper protection. Mr. Speaker, I have mentioned the issue of loans and mortgages, and banks have expressed willingness to re-amortize, to, you know, if it was a 20-month facility, make it, extend it for the period of the pandemic. So during this period, there are no charges, there is no interest. And I'm glad, based on our interaction, the banks have actually said that certain transactions will not be charged as of now, and they have actually restructured loans amounting to 160 billion. It is a pandemic. It is not an epidemic. It is not malaria. It is not a landslide. It is a global pandemic, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, moving forward, and I hope that brings some, you know, understanding or some context to it. We've had everybody who has come on both sides. Of course, there were the extremes. There is an association called the Landlords and Tenants Association. And, you know, I think the Registrar of Societies needs to explain, because I don't see both of them being in one association, because it is like an association of the folks and sheep, you know, together. But nonetheless, there is freedom of association, and if they're registered, we respect what they said. But there's those extremes saying to halt all rent payments. You cannot do that. You cannot do that in any society. You can't do that. But we need to create support such that government is able to support landlords not to evict those. And it's not for everybody. Unless you can demonstrate that your income, that you've been laid off, you've been fired, or your income has gone down, that facility is not for you, because some people would want to take advantage of that, yet they're still receiving their income as usual, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've been able to look at the issues regarding penalties. Some say the penalties are too stiff, but we chose to disagree a bit, because, Mr. Speaker, the penalties we've put in the bill is if you misuse resources meant for cushioning the poor, or if you make false claims, Mr. Speaker, to a public or private entity during a pandemic, like a bank, if you misappropriate donations or foodstuffs, as we are seeing and we're hearing might be happening in certain areas, Mr. Speaker, you get a very serious punishment. You must be punished, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are seeing that this is time where accountability might be going out the window. People are saying because of this urgency to procure, procurement rules are not being followed in county governments and in the national government in certain departments. So we have worded very strongly in our report, which we shall move in the afternoon on the fifth progress report, that, Mr. Speaker, the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority, we have put accounting officers on the spot, and the ESEC to actually look very keenly at all procurement happening at this time. So people don't just start saying, because it's a pandemic, let me buy wheelbarrows, or let me buy, what was it, jerry cans at I don't know what price, let me buy masks at 2,000 shillings, Mr. Speaker. No, the rules must be followed. But in this bill, we're saying, if you're caught misappropriating, I think we've put, is it 10 years? One, you will pay thrice the value of the goods you've appropriated, and you have a minimum sentence of 10 years. We must stop taking Kenyans for a ride. What kind of a person can take food that is meant for a hungry person in the slum, Mr. Speaker, and decide to sell it? That person deserves to be in jail. If they really wanted food, let us feed them from jail, because our prisoners are also being fed, Mr. Speaker. But we cannot allow any public officer or any private individual to misuse and misappropriate funds during the time of a pandemic. Mr. Speaker, there are other proposals that we are bringing in, including the issue of timelines, as Senator Kasanga has said. And I'm glad when we had a meeting with NTSA and the Ministry of Transport, they were very pragmatic, and they said, actually, it is true. If we cannot be able to give you a new license during this time, and your license just expired just before the pandemic or during the pandemic, it should then be deemed to continue operating during that time. Because, you cannot go, right now, you cannot get the digital driving license because of the thumbprint issues and the proximity issues, because they have to take your biometrics. So let it continue operating. If there are certain timelines, Mr. Speaker, for organizations, for instance, for you to do an AGM, that an AGM must be done within this time, according to the laws, we've said, one, we acknowledge if you can be able to do it in an online setting for those that are not very big numbers. But even then, the rules of that specific entity or institution in terms of convening the meeting or the thresholds required must be followed. It is the same way in which our committee is able to meet online, but if quorum is 3, quorum of 3 must still be achieved during that time, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, so that issue of timelines and statutory timelines has been covered in the bill. We are going to strengthen that. The issue of NSSF, NHIF, some of these payments within government has been addressed, Mr. Speaker, in this bill. And Mr. Speaker, really we're open to ideas and amendments and criticism and praise. The ratio, though, should balance a bit towards the positive criticism or constructive. Because, Mr. Speaker, at such a time of a pandemic, people say, oh, you're just legislating. We have a choice. The easier route is to do nothing. To say, oh, itaisha tu. Sorry, to use Swahili. To say that it will end, it will stop. Or, Mr. Speaker, we have a choice to actually determine that we as leaders, we as the Senate, we as the elected representatives will actually play our role, play our part in implementing or coming up with ideas to cushion Kenyans. This is the time Kenyans want to see us. This is the time Kenyans want to see strong leadership. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that the President, put out a fund for musicians and for artists, Mr. Speaker, who at this time, are not getting any pay, are not getting any shows, they cannot perform anywhere. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the CS of Sports and Culture has directed it will be pay for work. It won't just be, lose money. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you saw. Sorry, Senator. I'm sure you saw, Mr. Speaker.
Proceed.
I'm sure you saw a presentation where me and my sons were rapping, and we have said that we need to be part of that 100 million shillings because we are also educating people about coronavirus, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, further to that, we are saying that on top of the cushioning, we need to think of a post-corona recovery strategy. Mr. Speaker, Kenya will have to go on. Our economy will have to go on. The country will have to go on. And this is the time for us to develop a thorough post-corona economic recovery strategy. We are glad there's a subcommittee led by Cabinet Secretary Margaret Kobia, But beyond that, Mr. Speaker, we are listening to various institutions. I thank the International Budget Partnership who came before us, the Institute for Social Accountability, a young student in Geneva of economics, and many others who've been able to bring very, very good ideas that we're incorporating in this bill. So Mr. Speaker, and I can see the mood in the House is changing, signaling something. Can I be allowed to finish? Thank you, Leader of Majority.
How many minutes?
Mr. Speaker.
How many minutes?
Mr. Speaker, this is very important, 5 minutes. I can hear he has started his work badly by pressuring somebody on the floor. Just allow me to finish. This is the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, this is the bill the whole country is talking about. And knowing that the Senate has taken initiative and leadership on this issue. So, Mr. Speaker, let me just go to finish in just 5 minutes as people acclimatize with the House. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Senator Beth Mugo, Senator Ochilo, Honorable Kaluma from the National Assembly, COTU, FKE, the Gender Equality Commission, Human Rights Commission, Tigros Association, Zalendo Trust, civil society organizations, and many other institutions that have been able to come and give us input. We are still open to listening to your input because we hope to go to committee, if SBC allows, this afternoon or next Tuesday, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with those very few remarks, I wish to second this bill on the management of pandemics. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, honorable senators, I propose that the Pandemic Response and Management Bill, Senate Bill number 6 of 2020, be read a second time. So, honorable senators, before we proceed for debate, I have a communication to make. I have received communication from the Jubilee Coalition from the Office of the Deputy Minority Whip, Senator Irungu Kangata, dated 11th May 2020. The letter of communication was accompanied with the following documents: minutes of the Jubilee Parliamentary Coalition meetings dated 11th May 2020, which is a record of the proceedings of the meeting, together with resolutions, 2 duly signed list of senators who attended the above indicated meeting, 3 post-election coalition agreement between the Jubilee Party of Kenya and Kenya African National Union, 4 register of political parties certificates dated 8th of May 2020. The minutes show that 20 senators attended the meeting and resolved unanimously to 1, remove the current leader of majority, Senator Kipchumba Murkomen, in accordance with Standing Order 19.5. B, remove the current majority whip, Senator Susan Kihika, in accordance with Senate Standing Order 19.5. C, elect Senator Samuel Bogisho as Senate Majority Leader. D, elect Senator Irungu Kangata as Senate Majority Whip. E, elect Senator Haji Farhia Ali as Senate Deputy Majority Whip. I'm satisfied with the changes that the changes were made in accordance with Senate Standing Order 19.1, 2, 3, 40, 5, and 7, and meets the threshold required under Standing Order 19.5, there having been a majority of votes. Accordingly, I wish to communicate to the House that the majority has effected changes which shall now take effect as follows. Senate Majority Leader, Senator Samuel Bogisho. 2, Senate Minority Whip, Senator Irungu Kangata. 3, Senator Majority Whip, Senator Haji Farhia. For avoidance of doubt, Senator Aden Dulo Fatuma continues to be Senate Deputy Majority Leader, as no change were made affecting the officer. I will make a reasoned ruling in due course. Senator Mohamud.
I just saw a communication, something about the political parties deputy tribunal, that whatever was agreed between KANU and Jubilee was null and void, and she left to be determined at a later date. I don't know whether it has come to your attention, Mr. Speaker, sir.
That's why I said I'll give a reasoned ruling in due course.
Mr. Speaker.
Senator Cherio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the decision that you're about to make, but this is extremely unfortunate. Mr. Speaker, these are extraordinary times. It calls upon you to stand firm and be the speaker that this House elected you to be. To arbitrate, be fair, be firm, and resolute in defense of this institution. I have information in my possession, Mr. Speaker, and I'd wish to know. It will be proper, before the Speaker communicates such a decision, that this House is furnished with the alleged minutes of the meeting, who are present, who signed, because we have supplied your office this morning with a list of 20 senators from the Jubilee Party that have signed and said they were not party to that meeting. Number one, Mr. Speaker, Jubilee has 34 senators in this House. We only have a coalition agreement with PDR. That makes it 35. If 20 senators sent a letter to your office this morning urging you and reminding you that they were never party to these changes, then where did these numbers that are allegedly being used to make these changes come to? Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I am aware that you are also in possession of a letter from the whip of the majority side informing you of a court order that was issued this morning, interim orders from the PPDT, informing you that that decision that was made to enter KANU and Jubilee into a post-election coalition is null and void and stayed because it was non-procedural. How you choose to treat this information, Mr. Speaker, is out there for history to remember that at such a time as this, when the country was faced with such a serious pandemic as we are dealing with, people sat somewhere, made forgeries, and we are about to sanction it as a House. We will go down so badly, Mr. Speaker. I plead with you, as you make your decision, to tell us the truth about what happened. Establish for us who attended this meeting, who are these alleged 20 senators that met, and also tell us why there's a contravention of Standing Order number 19.4 that directs that it is the whip of the majority side who writes to you. So we would wish to see this letter from Whip Senator Susan Kihika informing you of these changes. I rest my case, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Pareno.
Mr. Speaker, sir, we have standing orders in this House. The Speaker has made his pronouncement. The Speaker has made his ruling and his findings. And is it in order for Senator Cheruyot to purport to question a communication and a decision of the Speaker? Because in his submissions, what he's trying to do is to question your mandate, which mandate is given by the same orders that govern him and govern this House.
Senator Murgomen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is with tremendous respect that I make the following comments. First, Mr. Speaker, I respect this House, I respect the rules of this House, I respect the Constitution and the standing orders. Mr. Speaker, we have received your communication. Note that we were not aware of the machinations and the schemes that were happening. But Mr. Speaker, I am shocked by yourself. This morning, I came to your office with a Senate Majority Whip, and we served you with an order that was procured after an application where the Majority Whip was part of the application. In that application, Mr. Speaker, the court is very express, the tribunal is very express that, Mr. Speaker, it stayed any decision that was going to be made based on the purported coalition agreement between KANU and Jubilee. That is really weighty. Mr. Speaker, when the history of this House will be written, and your time as the second Speaker under the new Constitution, that very decision is going to be very key. Number two, Mr. Speaker, I stand here knowing for sure that if you have 20 numbers, and the court has ruled that 3 of them from KANU cannot participate in the elections, Mr. Speaker, meaning you would only remain with 18 members of Jubilee, and 17 members of the Jubilee side, which together with PDR we formed 35, meaning that the majority of the remaining members were against the decision. If you go further, Mr. Speaker, when you ruled on the case of Orengo replacing, Senator Orengo replacing Senator Wetangula, you made it clear about the form of the communication, that the communication can only come, and the standing orders is expressed, standing order 19. It can only come from the whip if it is in the removal of majority leader, and the majority leader if it is coming from the removal of the whip, anticipating that there would be no situation where you remove both of them at the same time. Mr. Speaker, these are very important positions. It's not about my position. And if, Mr. Speaker, you have made your determination, you have been pushed to a corner to make that decision. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to say this.
Order, Senator.
Mr. Speaker,
what's your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, I am the one who is affected by this decision. So if my colleagues can give me that small moment of respect, because, Mr. Speaker, they will have the rest of the 2.5 years to celebrate this decision.
But also you should note what you say. When you say I was pushed to a corner.
If, Mr. Speaker, I am not saying you are pushed by anybody. I've just said if the evidence before you pushed you or whatever pushed you to a corner and you've made a decision, and a decision that is not reasoned, it is not giving the reasons, doesn't take us the names, it doesn't tell us what you do with the tribunal decision that came before you. You are saying you will have a reasoned now decision later. Allow me then to say this, Mr. Speaker. When I was a student leader at the university, one of the things I went through was a training on leadership. And I remember only one very important aspect of leadership, that the moment you take a position, whether it is the speaker, the majority leader, or even as a senator, the moment you take that position, always prepare yourself for the day you leave that position. Mr. Speaker, I am not worried and I have no problem not being the majority leader. What was only being defended on this side was the fact that we must follow the rules. Be it as it may, Mr. Speaker, if finally you will disregard the law and make a decision that I'm not going to be the majority leader in this House, what I can only say is that I want to thank my colleagues who voted for me, supported me throughout, and who have continued having faith in me, even amidst a lot of intimidation from the executive. Number two is to thank my staff, about 6 or 7 staff of the Office of the Majority Leader, who will quickly, Mr. Speaker, this afternoon, the only people that are in my mind at the moment, Mr. Speaker, is not me. It's my staff. And I know they've done tremendous job. They have loans. They have commitments to their families. This afternoon, they are going to lose their jobs by a stroke of a political conmanship, Mr. Speaker. So I feel for them. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to say this, that I want to thank them for their support. I will stand by them as a person. I have just started my political life. I have only been 8 years, actually 7 years in politics, Mr. Speaker. I believe this is just but the morning of our political careers. There will be a brighter future. I want to tell them that they should take heart. We will come back and come back big, Mr. Speaker, and they must be able to continue looking forward to that great future. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I wish during this time of coronavirus that our focus, Mr. Speaker, we were told not even 15 people should meet. Yet we are told that about 20 people met in State House to plot out to remove Murkomen. Mr. Speaker, if the only agenda for our party, Jubilee, has been wrangles from 2018 up to now, not focusing on delivery of services. If the greatest achievement of the President of Kenya is to demonstrate to the people of this country that I have removed my majority leader, I'm a big man. Mr. Speaker, the President is already a big man. I am just but a son of a squatter, born and brought up in Embobut. To be a subject of his discussion over and over again, I want to say, Mr. President, now therefore deliver for the people of Kenya. Murkomen is out of the way. If I was your stumbling block, deliver for the people of Kenya. Allow all the bills that, Mr. Speaker, has been signed unconstitutionally, and which, Mr. Speaker, this House went to court to challenge. allow those bills to come to Senate. Mr. Speaker, I want to tell the President, stop lying to the Senate. You told us you will give us oversight fund. Bring the oversight fund to the Senate if Murkomen was the stumbling block. It is only, Mr. Speaker, if I was the only reason, Mr. Speaker, that Senate was not being protected, I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that it is time.
Order, Senator.
Mr. Speaker, it is time.
There's a point of order.
I want to conclude, Mr. Speaker.
There's a point of order. Order, Senator Murkomen. Please. Yes. What's your point of order? Then you conclude, Senator Murkomen.
Mr. Speaker,
what's your point?
I was on a point of order, Mr. Speaker. So if
Order?
Yeah,
No.
I stood on a point of order.
No, I thought.
Mr. Speaker, again, we are guided by rules of this House. Is it in order for Senator Kipchumba Murkomen to impute on the conduct, conmanship on the conduct of the President of the Republic of Kenya?
I never said it.
If he wishes to accuse the President, then it is time for him to make a substantive motion to that effect. Is it in order for him to discuss the President and his conduct?
Yes,
Mr. Speaker, I have not discussed the conduct of the President. I know the rules of this House. The President promised this House oversight fund. Mr. Speaker, 2.5 years down the line, he has not delivered. The President promised that in this House, Mr. Speaker, the signatures, Mr. Speaker, of his bills, Mr. Speaker, must come to both houses.
What's your
He
point
has
of
not
order,
delivered.
Senator?
Mr. Speaker, the respect of this House can be more achieved if I pave way for that respect to be achieved.
There's a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, whatever our passions, whatever our anger, the rules of this House must be observed. I heard Senator Murkomen state unequivocally that the President should stop lying to the nation and he should now deliver the things he itemized. Mr. Speaker, is it in order for him to run away from his statement and try to persuade us that he didn't make those statements? Mr. Speaker, I urge you that if he cannot withdraw the statement now, we look at the proceedings of the House in the afternoon or tomorrow, and he should accordingly withdraw and apologize.
Mr. Speaker, I didn't say the President lied.
So Senator Murkomen, just
Yes.
To inform you, Standing Order 96, contents of speeches, neither the personal conduct of the President nor the conduct of the Speaker or any judge, nor the judicial conduct of any other person performing judicial functions, nor any contact of the head of state or government or the representative in Kenya of any friendly country or the conduct of the holder of an office whose removal from such office is dependent upon a decision of the Senate shall be referred to adversely, except upon a specific substantive motion of which at least 3 days notice has been given. So I think
Thank you, Mr.
observe
Speaker.
that.
I am aware of the standing order. I am very clear in my debate. I am within the debating rules. I just want to conclude by saying this, that I hope, Mr. Speaker, by removing me and Senator Susan Kika, and procedurally and illegally and unconstitutionally, it will improve the relationship between this House and the National Assembly. It will also improve, Mr. Speaker, the executive promises to this House. Then I hope, Mr. Speaker, the President will not sign any other bill that, Mr. Speaker, concerns counties that doesn't come through this House. Mr. Speaker, I will remain focused on the rule of law, on the things that affect Kenyans, on defending the people of Elgeyo Marakwet, whom I am so grateful that they elected a son of a squatter to come to this House. And Mr. Speaker, to my adversaries, I want to tell them you can celebrate, you can cheer, you can be happy. I will be coming back, and coming back big. And Mr. Speaker, with all those remarks, I just want to say this. I know you will say the conduct of the Speaker is being put in doubt. You are my friend. I've known you for long. You've been a DC in my place. I knew you when you were governor. I moved the motion. I defended you here when Orengo and Wetangula wanted to bring Senate documents against you. Mr. Speaker, this is not your decision. You made this decision under duress and undue influence. and I'm sorry you had to do it.
Order,
Thank you,
Senator,
Mr. Speaker.
Order, Senator Murkomen. Order.
On a point of order, those remarks about the speaker, and I've been in this house many years, and I've had wars with speakers. I've had a war with Caparo, Senator Caparo, but never, never, never in the history of my life in Parliament would I address the speaker in the manner in which you have been addressed. Mr. Speaker, if Mr. Murkomen, Senator Murkomen, wants to proceed to be part of this House, he should have no alternative but withdraw those remarks that he has made about you personally. Because when you sit on that chair, the person, Ken Lusaka, is not the equivalent of the Speaker of the Senate. He cannot undermine the authority of your office. So, Mr. Speaker, I demand that he withdraws and apologizes. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, we are going to speak on this issue since the other side has responded. We are also going to speak on this issue, the legality of the decision and whatever they also been doing. We are going to address those issues. And I hope this continues in the afternoon.
Senator Linturi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to weigh in to this matter. Mr. Speaker, some 12 years ago, or thereabout, there was once a great man that I personally miss, who happens to come from your area. Mr. Speaker, that time, this country was faced with serious problems. And Mr. Speaker, at that particular time, because of the opportunity, courtesy of the people of the Wegembe South when I served them as a member of parliament, very weighty decisions were placed before him for determination. When I look around this house, I think it's only Senator Orengo and Mahmoud that was a member of parliament then. And Mr. Speaker, the question was what decision should have been made for the greater good of the country, or...
Honorable Senators, sorry to interrupt you. It's now 12:30 p.m., time to interrupt the business of the Senate. The House therefore stands adjourned until today, 2:30 p.m., when we continue.
I hope I'll get my time in the afternoon.
You will.
Okay.